The entire ballroom went silent when Dr. Ethan Reeves looked at Cornelia Fowler and whispered, "There's no possible biological connection between you and the Fowler family." For a second, she thought he had confused her file with someone else's. Then Logan laughed. Not nervous laughter. Not shocked laughter. Cruel laughter. The kind that cuts a woman open in front of 300 wealthy strangers. "Well," he said, lifting his champagne glass, while Sabrina smirked beside him, "maybe now we finally know why she's always been the different one." Cornelia felt every eye in the room crawl across her skin as her mother looked away, and her husband looked relieved. And in that moment she realized the blood test hadn't ruined her life. It had exposed everyone else's. If you've ever felt unwanted in the very place that was supposed to love you, this story will hit harder than you expect. And by the end, you may never look at family the same way again. Cornelia Fowler spent most of her childhood feeling like a guest in her own life. Not abused, not neglected in any obvious way, which somehow made it worse. The Fowler family lived in a sprawling white estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, where everything smelled expensive and looked perfect from the outside. Fresh hydrangeas lined the front walk every spring. The marble floors gleamed like glass. Family portraits stretched across the walls in gold frames large enough to belong in museums. And in every single portrait, Cornelia looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong photograph. Vivian Fowler had soft blonde hair and warm brown eyes. Richard Fowler had silver-streaked dark hair and sharp aristocratic features. Sabrina had inherited both their looks: perfectly golden skin, elegant smile, effortless confidence. Then there was Cornelia. Dark chestnut curls, gray-blue eyes, pale skin that never tanned, a face that somehow looked unfamiliar even while standing between them. People noticed. Children especially noticed. "Are you adopted?" Cornelia heard that question for the first time when she was 6 years old during a birthday party at the country club pool. She still remembered how Sabrina had laughed before answering for her. "She must be," Sabrina had joked. "Nobody else in our family looks haunted." Everyone laughed, even some of the adults. Cornelia laughed too because she learned early that humiliation hurt less when you pretended it didn't. By the time she turned 12, she understood the unspoken rules of the Fowler household. Sabrina was sunshine. Cornelia was obligation. Vivian never screamed. That would have been easier to survive. Instead, she perfected the art of elegant cruelty. Tiny comments, tiny cuts, tiny reminders that Cornelia never quite measured up. "You'd be prettier if you smiled naturally. Why are you always so sensitive? Sabrina never makes things difficult. You should be grateful for everything we've given you." Grateful. That word followed Cornelia through her entire childhood like a chain around her ankle. At dinner parties, Vivian would proudly introduce Sabrina first. "Our youngest is studying at Columbia. Our Sabrina is brilliant." Then, after a pause long enough to sting, "And this is Cornelia, nothing more." Like she required no explanation because there was nothing remarkable to explain. Richard Fowler was different. Not cruel, just absent. He was one of the most respected corporate attorneys in New York, and he treated parenting the same way he treated legal contracts: efficiently, emotionally detached, and only when necessary. Sometimes Cornelia thought his silence hurt more than Vivian's criticism. At least criticism acknowledged her existence. The loneliness became unbearable during winters. The Fowler estate always felt cold in December, despite the fireplaces burning day and night. Snow covered the giant windows, while Sabrina hosted parties upstairs with music and laughter echoing through the halls. Cornelia usually stayed in her room sketching interiors in old notebooks. Rooms fascinated her. Not because of furniture, because rooms told the truth about people. You could walk into someone's home and instantly know whether they felt loved there. Cornelia never did. One night when she was 13, she came home from school drenched in snow after missing the driver pickup. She rang the doorbell. No answer. Again, nothing. The lights inside were on. She could hear music. Sabrina was hosting friends. Cornelia stood outside shivering for almost 40 minutes before Vivian finally opened the door. Instead of concern, her mother sighed in annoyance. "You should have called." "My phone died," Cornelia whispered through chattering teeth. Vivian's eyes moved slowly over her soaked clothes. "Honestly, Cornelia," she said coldly, "why does everything around you become dramatic?" Then she walked away. No hug, no towel, no apology. That night, Cornelia cried silently under 3 blankets while listening to laughter downstairs. Years later, she would realize something terrifying. Children who grow up emotionally starving become experts at accepting crumbs and calling it love, which explained Logan perfectly. She met him at 24 during a Manhattan fundraiser. He was magnetic from the beginning, tall, controlled, impossibly polished, the kind of man who made every woman in the room straighten unconsciously when he walked past. But when Logan Mercer looked at Cornelia, he looked at her like she mattered. At least in the beginning. "You have sad eyes," he told her the night they met. Not cruelly, tenderly. Like he understood sadness personally. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. Logan listened carefully, remembered details, sent flowers to her office, called her brilliant when she doubted herself. For the first time in her life, Cornelia felt chosen, wanted, seen. Vivian adored Logan immediately. Now that she once whispered approvingly, "Is a man worthy of this family?" Cornelia should have noticed the wording. Not worthy of her, worthy of the family. But when you spend your entire life desperate for love, validation can feel dangerously close to salvation. So she married him. And little by little Logan changed. Not overnight. That was the terrifying part. Cruel men rarely become cruel all at once. First came the corrections. "You're overthinking again?" Then isolation. "Your friends are jealous of us." Then humiliation disguised as honesty. "I'm only trying to help you improve." By 32, Cornelia barely recognized herself. She had given up her interior design career because Logan insisted his schedule was too demanding for two ambitious people in one marriage. She stopped wearing bright colors because he once said they made her look childish. She apologized constantly. For speaking too loudly, for asking too many questions, for crying, especially for crying. And somehow, despite all of it, she still believed if she loved him correctly enough, he might become the man he used to pretend to be. The night of the gala shattered that illusion forever. After the blood test humiliation, Cornelia drove back to the Fowler estate alone because Logan refused to leave early. "Don't be dramatic," he told her in the parking lot. "It's just information, just information." As if her entire identity hadn't exploded in front of strangers. The house was silent when she entered. She walked upstairs numbly toward her childhood bedroom, the same room preserved in untouched perfection, like a museum exhibit. For a long moment she simply stood there staring at the pale blue walls. Then something inside her shifted. Not strength, not yet. Something smaller, more dangerous. Doubt. Cornelia slowly walked toward the closet and pulled down an old memory box from the top shelf. Inside were childhood drawings, ballet ribbons, birthday cards, and faded photographs. At the very bottom sat something she had never noticed before, a hospital bracelet. Tiny, yellowed with age. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too still. Printed across the faded band was a newborn's identification label, but the name didn't say Cornelia Fowler. It said Baby Girl Holloway. Cornelia stopped breathing. Cornelia barely slept after finding the hospital bracelet. She spent the entire night sitting on the edge of her childhood bed, staring at the faded words over and over until sunrise turned the curtains pale gold. Baby Girl Holloway? Not Fowler, not Cornelia. Holloway. Every time she closed her eyes, Logan's voice echoed in her head. Maybe now we finally know why she's always been the different one. The worst part wasn't the cruelty. It was the relief in his voice. Like he had been waiting for this moment. Downstairs, the house slowly came alive with the sounds of staff preparing breakfast. Cups clinked, doors opened and closed softly. Somewhere in the kitchen, Sabrina laughed. Cornelia's stomach twisted. How long had they known? She quickly shoved the bracelet into her coat pocket, just as a knock sounded at the bedroom door. Vivian entered without waiting for permission. Perfect as always. Cream silk blouse, diamond earrings, controlled expression. But for the first time in her life, Cornelia noticed something beneath the perfection. Fear. Vivian stood near the doorway instead of approaching her. "You left the gala abruptly," she said calmly. Cornelia stared at her mother for several seconds. "Why didn't you tell me?" Vivian's face hardened instantly. "I don't know what you mean." "The blood test." Silence. Not confusion, not shock. Silence. Cornelia slowly stood. "I'm not biologically related to this family." Vivian crossed her arms defensively. "Those tests make mistakes." "Then why do you look terrified?" For one brief second, something ugly flashed across Vivian's face. Not guilt, resentment. "As usual," Vivian snapped softly, "you're turning this into a spectacle." Cornelia felt her chest tighten, even now, even after everything. Vivian still managed to make Cornelia feel irrational for asking who she was. "You knew," Cornelia whispered. Vivian looked away first. That was answer enough. Before Cornelia could speak again, Sabrina appeared in the hallway wearing an oversized cashmere sweater and a smug expression that made Cornelia suddenly nauseous. "There you are," Sabrina said brightly. "Logan's been calling nonstop." Of course he had. Control slipping away always made Logan anxious. Cornelia brushed past both of them without another word. Neither woman stopped her. Neither woman apologized. And somehow that hurt more than if they had screamed. Outside, icy wind hit her face as she climbed into her car. Her hands shook violently against the steering wheel. She didn't drive home immediately. Instead, she parked near the Long Island Sound and sat staring at the gray water while memories replayed differently now. Every strange comment, every cold look, every moment she felt unwanted. Suddenly it all had shape, meaning. Maybe she hadn't been imagining it her entire life. Maybe she truly had never belonged there. Her phone buzzed again. Logan. She declined the call. Another one came instantly. Then another. Finally a text appeared. Logan. Stop being childish. We need to talk strategically about this. Strategically. Not emotionally. Not lovingly. Strategically. Cornelia laughed bitterly under her breath. Even her identity crisis had become a business problem to him. An hour later, she returned to the Manhattan penthouse she shared with Logan. The apartment overlooked Central Park and appeared constantly in architecture magazines because Logan loved attention almost as much as he loved power. Everything inside the penthouse was sharp-edged and immaculate. Cold gray marble, black glass. White furniture nobody actually relaxed on. Cornelia had designed softer concepts when they first moved in. Logan rejected every single one. Warm spaces look weak, he told her once. Now she realized the apartment reflected him perfectly. Logan was waiting near the floor-to-ceiling windows when she entered, still wearing his tuxedo, still impossibly composed. You ignored my calls. Cornelia removed her coat slowly. You publicly humiliated me. His jaw tightened slightly. That wasn't humiliation. It was honesty. The words hit harder than shouting would have. Cornelia stared at him in disbelief. You laughed at me. Logan poured himself a drink calmly. You're emotionally spiraling and I need you to stay rational? Rational. God, he loved that word. Logan used it like a weapon whenever Cornelia had feelings inconvenient to him. You already knew, she said quietly. He didn't answer immediately, which meant yes. Cornelia felt something inside her begin cracking open. How long Logan sighed like she was exhausting him, for years. Her breath caught. Years. Years of watching her question herself. Years of pretending. Years of letting her feel insane. And you never told me it wasn't relevant. Cornelia actually recoiled. Not relevant. Her entire identity wasn't relevant. You don't understand how unstable you become when emotions take over, Logan continued coolly. Your family wanted to protect you. My family, she repeated. For the first time, anger flickered behind Logan's controlled expression. You know what I mean? No, Cornelia whispered. I don't anymore. The silence between them stretched painfully. Then Logan walked closer, lowering his voice into that manipulative softness she used to mistake for tenderness. Cornelia, listen to me carefully. People like your father built empires because they understood something important. And what's that? That truth is only useful when it benefits you. She stared at him. This man had once kissed her forehead while she slept. This man had once held her hand during panic attacks. This man had once promised she would never feel alone again. Had any of it been real, Logan studied her face carefully. Then he made a mistake. A small one. The kind arrogant people make when they believe someone is too broken to fight back. You're still lucky, he said. Cornelia blinked slowly. Lucky. You grew up wealthy, protected, educated. Most people would kill for that life. There it was again. Grateful, always grateful, as though love could be replaced by luxury. Cornelia suddenly remembered being 13 years old, freezing outside the Fowler estate while everyone else laughed inside. She remembered every birthday Sabrina ruined, every criticism, every lonely dinner, every apology she made for existing too loudly. And something shifted. Not confidence? Not yet. But clarity. Painfully sharp clarity. You know what's funny? She said softly. Logan frowned slightly. For my entire life, I thought there was something wrong with me, Cornelia. No, she interrupted. I thought I was too emotional, too sensitive, too difficult to love. Logan's face darkened subtly at the interruption, but maybe she continued, tears filling her eyes. I was just surrounded by people who benefited from me feeling small. For the first time in years, Logan seemed caught off guard. Cornelia grabbed her bag and started toward the hallway. Where are you going? I don't know yet. You're overreacting. She stopped walking, then slowly turned back toward him. The old Cornelia would have apologized. The old Cornelia would have stayed. The old Cornelia would have begged him to explain, but exhaustion was finally becoming stronger than fear. You know, she said quietly, I used to think you were the person who loved me most in the world. Logan's expression remained unreadable. And now he asked. Cornelia looked directly into his eyes. Now I think you married me because I was easy to control. For the first time since she met him, Logan looked genuinely angry. Not cold, not polished. Angry. That's ridiculous. Is it? You're being manipulated by emotions? No, Cornelia whispered. I think I'm waking up. She walked out before he could answer. But as the elevator doors closed, one final memory surfaced in her mind. 3 weeks earlier, late at night, Logan standing on the balcony during a phone call he didn't know she overheard. She still has no idea who she really is, he had said. At the time, Cornelia thought he meant emotionally. Now she understood. And deep in her stomach, a terrifying realization began forming. Logan Mercer hadn't just hidden the truth from her. He had built his entire life around it. The Fowler family hosted Sunday dinners like royalty performing a ritual. Everything about them was rehearsed. The crystal glasses, the polished silverware, the carefully curated conversations about stock markets, charity boards, and people rich enough to pretend morality came naturally to them. Cornelia used to spend hours preparing for those dinners, choosing the right dress, the right makeup, the right smile, not because she wanted approval anymore, because humiliation hurt less when she looked beautiful while enduring it. But this Sunday felt different. The moment she stepped into the dining room of the Greenwich estate, she sensed it immediately. Something was off. Vivian sat at the head of the table in emerald silk, composed as ever, though faint tension lingered around her eyes. Richard skimmed financial documents beside his wineglass without acknowledging Cornelia's arrival. And Sabrina looked radiant, almost glowing. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and she wore a fitted black dress that looked strangely familiar. Too familiar. Cornelia's stomach tightened, then Logan walked in behind her. Calm, tailored, perfectly controlled, as though he hadn't shattered her reality 48 hours earlier. Cornelia, Vivian said smoothly, You're late. It was 7:03. Cornelia sat quietly beside Logan without answering. Nobody asked how she was doing. Nobody mentioned the blood test. Nobody acknowledged the emotional wreckage hanging over the table like smoke. That was the Fowler way. Ignore pain long enough, and eventually the victim looks unreasonable for still feeling it. Dinner began with harmless conversation. Sabrina talked about a luxury wellness retreat in Aspen. Richard discussed an acquisition deal. Logan spoke confidently about upcoming mergers and investor expansion. Cornelia barely touched her food. Then Vivian finally turned toward her with a thin smile. You've been very quiet lately. Cornelia looked up slowly. I wonder why? The room cooled instantly. Vivian dabbed her mouth delicately with a napkin. There's no reason to become theatrical. Logan sighed beside her. Can we not do this tonight? Cornelia almost laughed. Not do this. As if her identity crisis was poor dinner etiquette. You all knew, she said quietly. And nobody thought I deserved the truth. Richard finally looked up. Cornelia, he said in the same tone lawyers used before destroying someone in court, there are complexities you don't understand. There it is, she whispered bitterly. That word again? Complexities, strategies, rationality. Everyone around her spoke like human emotions were inconveniences to manage. Sabrina leaned back casually in her chair. You're acting like your life was horrible, she said. You grew up privileged? Cornelia stared at her. You think money replaces love? Sabrina rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You always wanted to be the victim. That sentence hit something deep inside Cornelia because it echoed Logan perfectly. Same wording, same dismissive cruelty, almost rehearsed. Cornelia suddenly looked between them carefully. The shared glances, the synchronized irritation, the strange comfort between them. A cold sensation crawled slowly down her spine. Then she saw it. Around Sabrina's wrist sparkled a delicate diamond bracelet. Tiny emerald stones lined the center. Cornelia stopped breathing. Last anniversary, Logan claimed he had purchased that bracelet as a corporate thank you gift for an executive partner. Cornelia remembered because she had admired it briefly in the jewelry box before Logan snapped it shut. That one isn't for you. Now Sabrina wore it casually while sipping wine across the table. Cornelia felt the room tilt slightly. No. No, no, no. Her brain tried rejecting the thought immediately. Sabrina noticed her staring. A slow smile curved across her lips. You okay, Cornelia? Logan shifted subtly beside her, too subtly, like a man trying not to react. That tiny movement confirmed everything. Cornelia suddenly couldn't hear the conversation anymore. Blood roared in her ears. Every strange moment replayed instantly. The late-night texts, private jokes, the way Sabrina touched Logan's arm too comfortably. How Logan defended Sabrina even during arguments. How Sabrina always knew intimate details about Cornelia's marriage. Oh, God. Oh, my God, Cornelia whispered aloud. Vivian frowned sharply. Cornelia? But Cornelia was staring directly at Logan now. He refused to meet her eyes. That hurt more than denial would have. You're sleeping with her? Cornelia said softly. Silence exploded across the table. Richard immediately stood. That's enough. Sabrina laughed nervously. Are you insane? But Cornelia kept staring at Logan, because guilty people always reveal themselves in the smallest ways. And Logan looked angry, not confused, not offended, angry. Say something, Cornelia whispered. Logan's jaw flexed. You're embarrassing yourself. There it was. Not denial, deflection. Cornelia felt something inside her crack violently. Vivian stood abruptly. We are not discussing this here. Why? Cornelia snapped suddenly. Because the truth ruins the perfect family image. Lower your voice. No. The word shocked everyone, including Cornelia herself. For years she swallowed every feeling to keep peace around people who never protected hers. Now rage finally burned hotter than fear. Sabrina crossed her arms defensively. You're being paranoid because of the blood test. Cornelia looked at her slowly. And you're wearing my husband's anniversary gift. Sabrina's face froze. Only for half a second. But it was enough. Richard cursed under his breath. Vivian looked horrified. Logan finally stood. Cornelia, he said coldly, you need to calm down. Cornelia laughed bitterly. That's your favorite phrase, isn't it? Because you spiral. No, she whispered. I react. Logan stepped closer, lowering his voice carefully. Not here. Which meant yes. Yes, it was true. Yes, he was terrified of public exposure. Cornelia felt humiliation spreading through her body like poison. Not just because of the affair, because suddenly she realized how long everyone at this table had probably underestimated her. The weak wife, the emotional daughter, the insecure woman too desperate for love to notice betrayal happening directly in front of her. Her eyes burned with tears, but this time she refused to hide them. You know what hurts the most, she said shakily. It's not even the cheating. Sabrina looked away. It's realizing I defended people who were destroying me behind my back. Vivian rubbed her temples. This family is under pressure right now. No, Cornelia interrupted. I'm under pressure. You people are just uncomfortable because I finally see you clearly. The room went dead silent. For the first time in her life, nobody had a response ready. Cornelia grabbed her purse quickly. Logan reached for her wrist. Don't leave like this. The touch made her physically recoil. His expression darkened instantly at the rejection, another mask slipping. How long, she whispered. Neither Logan nor Sabrina answered. Which was answer enough. Cornelia nodded slowly, tears finally escaping down her face. Then she walked toward the hallway before anyone could stop her. Behind her, Vivian called sharply, Cornelia Fowler, do not walk away from this conversation. Cornelia stopped near the doorway. For a brief moment, she almost turned around automatically. Years of conditioning, years of obedience. Then she remembered the hospital bracelet in her coat pocket. Baby girl Holloway. Not Fowler. Never Fowler. Slowly, she faced them one last time. And for the first time in her life, she realized something freeing. These people were not her family. Families could fail, families could break, but family was not supposed to feel like emotional warfare. You know something ironic, Cornelia said quietly. Nobody moved. I spent my whole life begging for a seat at this table. Her eyes drifted across every cold, guilty face in the room, but suddenly, she looked directly at Logan. I'm not sure any of you belong at mine. Then she walked out into the freezing Connecticut night. Halfway to her car, her phone vibrated inside her purse. A message from Logan, only 7 words. Did the blood results come back yet? Sent 2 nights ago. To Sabrina. Cornelia drove through the Connecticut night with tears blurring the highway lights into streaks of gold and white. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. Logan's text still burned in her mind. Did the blood results come back yet? Not concern, not confusion. Anticipation. Like the blood test had been part of a plan. By the time she reached Manhattan, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. Not physical exhaustion. Soul exhaustion. The kind that comes from realizing your entire life may have been built around lies. She parked several blocks away from the penthouse instead of going home immediately. Home. The word no longer felt accurate. At 2 a.m, Cornelia sat alone inside a 24-hour diner near Lexington Avenue, staring at untouched coffee while rain slid down the windows. Across the room, strangers laughed softly over pancakes and fries. Normal people. Normal lives. Cornelia envied them suddenly. She envied people who trusted their own memories. Her phone buzzed again. Logan. We need to handle this carefully. Another message followed instantly. Logan. Don't speak to anyone before we talk. Cornelia stared at the screen for several long seconds. Then another realization settled into place. Logan wasn't afraid for her. He was afraid of what she might discover. That thought finally pushed her from grief into action. By sunrise, Cornelia sat inside her car outside St. Vincent Medical Archives in Lower Manhattan. Rain dripped steadily across the windshield while she rehearsed what she planned to say. She had no real strategy, only instinct and pain. Inside the hospital records building, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, while exhausted employees shuffled between filing rooms. Cornelia approached the reception desk carefully. I'm trying to access my birth records. The woman behind the desk barely looked up. Name Cornelia Fowler, the receptionist typed briefly, then paused. A strange expression crossed her face. I'm sorry, she said slowly. Your file has restricted access. Cornelia's pulse quickened. Restricted by who? Another pause. I can't disclose that information, please, Cornelia whispered. I just found out the people who raised me may not be my biological family. For the first time, sympathy softened the receptionist's face. Ma'am, there's legal authorization attached to your records. What kind of legal authorization? The woman hesitated, then quietly rotated the monitor slightly. At the bottom of the digital archive file appeared a legal seal. Mercer and Vale Legal Group. Cornelia stopped breathing. Mercer. Logan's firm. Cold nausea rolled through her stomach. No. No, no, no. This couldn't be coincidence anymore. Logan knew. Maybe he had always known. Can I at least know when the restriction was placed? Cornelia asked shakily. The receptionist clicked through another screen. Her eyes widened slightly. 21 years ago. 21. Long before Cornelia even met Logan, which meant someone connected to him had been involved long before their marriage. Cornelia walked out of the building feeling like the ground beneath her life had disappeared completely. Outside, Manhattan moved normally around her. Taxis honked, people rushed to work. Coffee carts steamed on street corners. And somehow the world kept spinning while hers collapsed. Her phone rang again. This time the screen showed Dr. Ethan Reeves. Cornelia answered immediately. Dr. Reeves. His voice sounded tense. Mrs. Mercer Fowler, she corrected automatically. Silence lingered briefly. Cornelia, he said carefully, you need to stop making official inquiries through hospital systems. Fear crawled up her spine. Why? Another pause. Then quietly, because someone powerful buried this decades ago. Cornelia leaned against a nearby wall as rain dampened her coat. Who? I can't discuss this over the phone. You already know who I am, don't you? Dr. Reeves exhaled shakily. I know enough to tell you you're not imagining this. Tears instantly burned her eyes. Not imagining it. After a lifetime of gaslighting, those 4 words nearly destroyed her. Please, she whispered. Tell me the truth. I can't, he said quickly, but there's someone who might. Cornelia straightened. Who? A retired neonatal nurse named Evelyn Parker. Dr. Reeves lowered his voice further. She worked maternity at St. Vincent 32 years ago. Cornelia's heart pounded violently. She remembers things. What things? She refused hush money. Cornelia froze. Hush money? Dear God. This wasn't an accident, she whispered. No, Dr. Reeves admitted quietly. I don't think it was. Cornelia closed her eyes briefly as panic and adrenaline collided inside her chest. What do I do? You meet Evelyn? Where? I'll text you. Before hanging up, Dr. Reeves said one final thing. Cornelia, be careful who you trust. Then the line disconnected. 2 minutes later, an address appeared on her phone. A small diner in New Jersey. Meeting time tomorrow, noon. Then another message arrived immediately after. Come alone. The next 24 hours passed like a fever dream. Cornelia ignored Logan completely, despite dozens of calls and messages ranging from manipulative concern to visible irritation. Logan. You're escalating this unnecessarily. Logan. Stop talking to outsiders. Logan. We can solve this privately. Privately, meaning quietly, meaning controllably. For the first time in years, Cornelia did not respond, and it terrified Logan. She could feel it. By the following afternoon, Cornelia drove across the George Washington Bridge toward New Jersey under dark gray skies. Every mile increased the pressure inside her chest. What if Evelyn confirmed everything? What if she denied it? What if Cornelia discovered she truly had belonged nowhere her entire life? The diner looked ordinary when she arrived. Small, old-fashioned, neon sign flickering faintly. Inside smelled like coffee and butter. An elderly woman sat alone in the corner booth wearing a pale blue cardigan. Silver hair, sharp eyes. She looked up the moment Cornelia entered. Recognition flashed across her face instantly. Not confusion, recognition. Oh my God, the woman whispered. Cornelia stopped walking. The woman slowly stood from the booth, visibly emotional. You have her eyes. Cornelia's breath caught painfully. Who? The woman's eyes filled with tears. Your mother? The world tilted. Cornelia sat down mechanically across from her. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Evelyn Parker reached carefully into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. Her trembling hands slid it across the table. Cornelia looked down and forgot how to breathe. The woman in the picture looked startlingly familiar. Dark chestnut hair, gray-blue eyes, the same eyes staring back at Cornelia from every mirror her entire life. She came to the hospital every week for almost a year, Evelyn whispered emotionally, begging us to admit her baby survived. Cornelia's throat tightened violently. She knew a mother knows. Tears blurred Cornelia's vision instantly. What happened to me? Evelyn looked around the diner nervously before lowering her voice. There was a newborn switch scandal at St. Vincent in the early 90s. Cornelia felt ice flood her veins. A powerful family paid to make certain records disappear. No, Cornelia whispered. Evelyn nodded sadly. Some babies were placed where money needed them to be. Money needed them to be. The sentence made Cornelia physically nauseous. Why? She asked shakily. Evelyn's expression darkened. Because wealthy people believe they can purchase anything. Cornelia thought of the Fowler estate, of Richard, of Vivian, of Logan, all those polished people with expensive smiles and empty hearts. How do you know all this? Cornelia whispered. Because I tried to stop it. Silence fell heavily between them. Then Evelyn reached into her purse again. This time she removed a folded piece of paper, an address, a name written carefully across the top. Margaret Holloway. Cornelia stared at it with trembling hands. She never stopped searching for you, Evelyn whispered. Tears slid down Cornelia's face silently. For 32 years, someone out there had been grieving her, looking for her, wanting her. And suddenly, for the first time in her entire life, Cornelia no longer felt unwanted. Then Evelyn grabbed her wrist tightly. Her expression turned serious. Listen to me carefully, she whispered. Do not bring your husband into this. Cornelia's stomach dropped. Why Evelyn looked genuinely frightened now. Because people connected to Logan Mercer helped bury this story the first time. Cornelia didn't leave the diner immediately after Evelyn Parker's warning. She couldn't. Her body felt too heavy, too stunned. Outside the windows, rain tapped softly against the glass, while waitresses moved between tables carrying coffee and pie to strangers living ordinary lives. Meanwhile, Cornelia sat frozen in the corner booth, trying to process the fact that someone had stolen her entire identity before she was old enough to speak. Evelyn watched her carefully. "I know this is overwhelming." Cornelia laughed weakly. "Overwhelming?" Her voice cracked. "I don't even know who I am anymore." Evelyn's expression softened painfully. "Yes, you do." Cornelia looked up. "You're just finally learning who lied to you." That sentence settled somewhere deep inside her chest. Not because it healed anything, because it reframed everything. For 32 years, Cornelia believed something inside her was defective, too emotional, too sensitive, too difficult to love. Now she was beginning to understand something horrifying. Maybe she had simply spent her life trapped among emotionally dishonest people. Evelyn slid the old photograph closer across the table. "This is Margaret Holloway." Cornelia picked it up again carefully. The woman in the photo couldn't have been older than 30. She stood outside a hospital holding flowers, smiling despite obvious exhaustion. And she looked so much like Cornelia, it hurt. Not identical, but familiar in the intimate way only blood could explain. The same eyes, the same mouth, even the same slight crease between the brows when worried. Tears filled Cornelia's eyes instantly. "She really looked for me every week," Evelyn whispered. "For almost a year." Cornelia pressed trembling fingers against her lips. She kept saying the hospital made a mistake. She said she could feel her baby was alive. Oh my God. Evelyn nodded slowly, but powerful people wanted the situation buried. Cornelia's stomach tightened. Who? Evelyn hesitated. Fear flickered visibly across her face again. "I never learned every name involved," she admitted. "But I know lawyers were brought in very quickly. Richard Fowler." The thought appeared instantly. Cold, sharp, possible. And Logan? Cornelia asked carefully. Evelyn's expression darkened. "I don't know how much your husband knows," she said, "but I know the Mercer name has been connected to St. Vincent's legal affairs for decades." Cornelia felt physically ill. Logan hadn't just stumbled into this story. He had grown up near it, maybe inside it. Suddenly she remembered the first time Logan met Richard Fowler years ago. They clicked instantly, too instantly. Two ambitious men speaking the same emotional language, power, strategy, reputation. Not love. Never love. Cornelia swallowed hard. Why would they do this? Evelyn stared at her sadly. "You'd be amazed what wealthy families will do to preserve appearances." The sentence lingered heavily between them. Cornelia thought of Vivian, of every cold glance, every forced smile, every strange distance. Had Vivian hated her because she wasn't truly hers, or because raising Cornelia reminded her daily of what they had done? "What happened to Margaret after they told her the baby died?" Cornelia asked quietly. Evelyn looked down at her coffee. She had a breakdown. Cornelia closed her eyes briefly. Pain twisted through her chest unexpectedly. Not just for herself, for a woman she had never met, a woman who mourned a living daughter for 32 years. She lost everything after that, Evelyn continued softly. Her marriage collapsed. Her mental health suffered. Nobody believed her. Cornelia's eyes burned, because suddenly she understood something terrifying. Women in pain were always called irrational. Women asking questions were always called unstable. Logan did it to her. Vivian did it. The whole world did it. "You said some babies were placed where money needed them to be?" Cornelia whispered carefully. "What does that mean?" Evelyn looked around once more before answering. There were rumors that certain influential families couldn't have children. Cornelia froze. The Fowlers. Vivian had struggled with fertility for years before Cornelia's birth. It had become family gossip whispered at holiday parties when people thought Cornelia couldn't hear. Then suddenly, miraculously, Vivian became a mother. Cornelia's heartbeat quickened. "They took me," she whispered. Evelyn looked heartbroken. "I think they convinced themselves they were saving you." "No," Cornelia said shakily. "They were saving themselves." Silence settled heavily over the booth. Finally, Evelyn reached into her purse one last time and pulled out a folded piece of stationery. "This is Margaret's address." Cornelia stared at it without touching it. Fear flooded her suddenly. "What if she hates me?" Evelyn looked startled. "Hates you? What if seeing me destroys her all over again?" "Oh, sweetheart." The tenderness in Evelyn's voice nearly shattered Cornelia. She has loved you every single day of your life. Cornelia broke then. Not dramatically, not loudly, just silent tears sliding endlessly down her face while years of loneliness collapsed inside her chest, because nobody had ever said something like that to her before. Not once. Evelyn gently covered Cornelia's trembling hand. "You were wanted," she whispered firmly. "Never forget that. Wanted." The word wrapped around the emptiest parts of Cornelia's soul like warmth. After leaving the diner, Cornelia sat in her car for nearly 20 minutes, staring at Margaret Holloway's address. Boston. Not far. Close enough to change everything. Her phone suddenly vibrated again. Logan. She ignored it. Another call immediately followed. Then another. Finally, she answered. "What?" Silence lingered briefly on the line. Then Logan spoke carefully. "Where are you?" Cornelia almost laughed. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I'm worried about you." "Where are you?" Control first, always control first. "Why, you disappeared." "I needed space." "You're behaving irrationally again." Cornelia stared through the windshield at the rain-covered parking lot. Once upon a time that sentence would have worked. Now it only made her tired. "You know," she said softly, "it's fascinating how every emotion I have becomes irrational the second it inconveniences you." Logan exhaled sharply. "I'm trying to help you." "No," Cornelia whispered. "You're trying to manage me." Silence. Dangerous silence. Then Logan's tone cooled. "Have you spoken to anyone?" There it was. Fear. Real fear. Cornelia suddenly understood something important. Logan was not confident anymore. Good. "Why would that matter?" she asked calmly. "Because there are legal sensitivities involved." God. Everything was legal strategy to him. Even stolen children. Even grief. Even identity. Cornelia closed her eyes briefly. "I'm tired, Logan. Come home. Home." Again that word. And suddenly Cornelia realized she no longer associated home with safety, only surveillance. "I don't think I know where home is anymore," she admitted quietly. For the first time, Logan sounded genuinely unsettled. "Cornelia, did you ever love me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Silence answered first. Then, "Of course I did." Did. Past tense. Her heart cracked quietly. "You should come back before this gets uglier," Logan said finally. Cornelia's eyes opened slowly. "Not before you get hurt. Before this gets uglier." Meaning reputation, exposure, damage? Everything with Logan eventually revealed itself through language. Cornelia ended the call without another word. That night, she rented a small hotel room instead of returning to the penthouse. The room was simple. Warm lighting, soft blankets. Nothing expensive. Nothing performative. For the first time in years, she slept without Logan beside her. And sometime after midnight, Cornelia woke suddenly from a dream she couldn't fully remember. Tears covered her face. But strangely, so did relief, because deep down beneath all the pain and confusion, another feeling had begun quietly growing. Freedom. Then her phone lit up on the nightstand. A blocked number. Cornelia hesitated before answering. "Hello," a woman's voice responded softly. Emotional, fragile. "Cornelia." Her breath caught instantly. "Yes." The woman on the line started crying quietly. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's really you." Cornelia sat upright slowly. Every nerve in her body went still. "I'm sorry," she whispered shakily. "Who is this?" The woman tried to steady her breathing, then finally answered. "My name is Margaret Holloway." Cornelia stopped breathing the moment she heard Margaret Holloway's voice. Not because the woman sounded familiar, because she sounded devastated, like someone standing at the edge of hope, terrified it might disappear again. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Only soft breathing filled the line. Then Margaret whispered shakily, "I didn't know if you would answer." Cornelia sat frozen on the edge of the hotel bed, clutching the phone tightly enough to hurt. I don't know what to say." A quiet, broken laugh escaped Margaret. "That makes two of us." Cornelia closed her eyes. The woman's voice carried warmth she didn't recognize, because she had never truly received it before. Real tenderness, not conditional approval, not manipulation disguised as concern. Just tenderness. "How did you get my number?" Cornelia asked softly. "Evelyn called me." Of course she did. Cornelia stared at the rain-streaked hotel window while emotions collided violently inside her chest. Anger, grief, confusion, longing. What if this is a mistake, she whispered. Margaret answered instantly. It isn't. Something about the certainty in her voice shattered another piece of Cornelia's heart. I knew the second Evelyn described you. Margaret continued quietly. The gray-blue eyes run in my family. Cornelia pressed trembling fingers against her lips. No one had ever spoken about her features with affection before. Only difference, only suspicion, only discomfort. Margaret inhaled shakily. Do you know how many times I imagined this conversation? Cornelia felt tears sliding down her face silently. No. Every birthday, Margaret admitted softly. Every Christmas, every year. God. 32 years. 32 years of grief. Cornelia suddenly understood why her chest hurt so badly hearing this woman speak. Because somewhere deep inside herself she had spent 32 years grieving too. Not consciously, but emotionally. Grieving a love she never received. A belonging she never felt. What was I like? Cornelia asked before thinking. Margaret let out another tearful laugh. You hated sleeping unless music was playing. Cornelia froze. What, as a baby? Margaret whispered. You only calmed down when I sang. Cornelia's throat tightened violently. To this day, she still fell asleep with music playing softly in the background. A habit she never understood. Her chest ached suddenly with unbearable longing. How can you remember that? Because mothers remember everything. Cornelia broke down crying quietly. Not elegant tears, not controlled tears. Real grief. Margaret cried too, and for several minutes neither woman tried hiding it. After the call ended, Cornelia sat awake until sunrise, replaying every word repeatedly. By morning, something fundamental inside her had changed. The loneliness she carried her entire life no longer felt empty. Now it felt stolen. That distinction made her furious. Around noon, Logan finally found her, not physically, emotionally. His texts arrived one after another. Logan. We need to discuss public fallout. Logan investors are hearing rumors. Logan, Sabrina is upset. That last message nearly made Cornelia throw her phone across the room. Sabrina is upset, not you. Not your wife. Not the woman whose entire identity was ripped apart. Sabrina. Cornelia stared at the screen in disbelief. Then another realization hit her hard. Logan wasn't even pretending anymore. The emotional mask had slipped completely. And suddenly she needed to know the truth. All of it. Not just about the blood test, about them, about Logan and Sabrina. Cornelia left the hotel that evening wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, despite the cold weather. She hated how paranoid she felt now, but Evelyn's warning kept echoing in her mind. People connected to Logan Mercer helped bury this story. The thought poisoned everything. By 6 o'clock, Cornelia sat inside her parked car across from the Mercer Grand Hotel in downtown Manhattan. She knew Logan kept a private penthouse suite there for late corporate nights. For years she believed him. Now she wondered how many lies she swallowed because trusting people felt easier than confronting pain. The hotel entrance glowed warmly against the dark city streets while expensive cars arrived one after another. Cornelia waited. 7:30, 8:15, 9. Then she saw them. Logan stepped out of a black SUV wearing a charcoal coat and that same composed expression he wore during board meetings and funerals alike. Sabrina exited behind him laughing. Laughing. Like none of this mattered. Like Cornelia's life, collapsing was a temporary inconvenience. Cornelia's stomach twisted violently, but what hurt most wasn't seeing them together. It was how comfortable they looked. Familiar, intimate, practiced. This wasn't new. It couldn't be. Logan touched Sabrina's lower back gently as they entered the hotel, the exact gesture he used on Cornelia for years, a performative tenderness designed to appear protective. Suddenly, Cornelia saw everything differently. Every anniversary, every apology, every loving look. Had any of it ever belonged uniquely to her, or had Logan simply perfected the performance of devotion? Her chest burned. Still, she followed them inside. The hotel lobby buzzed with wealthy guests and low piano music. Cornelia kept enough distance to avoid being seen as Logan and Sabrina entered a private elevator requiring penthouse clearance. Cornelia moved instinctively before fear could stop her. She slipped into the elevator seconds before the doors closed. Sabrina gasped softly when she noticed her. Logan turned sharply, and for the first time in years, Cornelia saw genuine panic flash across his face. Not control, not calculation, panic. The elevator climbed in silence. No one spoke. No one breathed normally. Finally, Sabrina crossed her arms defensively. "You're acting insane." Cornelia laughed quietly. "There it is again." Logan's jaw tightened. "Cornelia." "No," she interrupted calmly. "I think I've spent enough years listening." The elevator doors opened into the private penthouse suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan glowing beneath the night sky. Champagne waited on ice beside the fireplace. Candles burned softly throughout the room. Romantic, prepared. Cornelia felt physically sick. Sabrina rolled her eyes dramatically. "This isn't what you think." Cornelia looked around slowly. "That's interesting," she whispered, "because I haven't even said what I think yet." Logan stepped closer carefully. "You're emotional right now." God. Always that word. Emotional. As though emotions invalidated truth. Cornelia reached into her purse slowly, then held up her phone. Recording screen active. "I think," she said softly, "you should both start talking honestly." For the first time, Sabrina looked nervous. Logan immediately hardened. "You're recording us?" "I spent years being manipulated by people who rewrite reality," Cornelia replied calmly. "I'm adapting," Sabrina scoffed. "Oh, please. You always needed drama." Cornelia turned toward her slowly. "No," she whispered. "I needed honesty." The room fell silent. Then Logan made another mistake. A cruel one. "You're overreacting because nobody can biologically explain you." The words landed like a slap. Even Sabrina looked uncomfortable. Cornelia stared at him in disbelief. "You really hate me, don't you?" For one brief second, something strange crossed Logan's face. Not guilt, resentment. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "You were always fragile." Cornelia felt something inside herself go still, not broken, still. Because suddenly she understood the truth. Logan didn't love fragile women, he loved controlling them. Every insecurity she ever confessed became a tool later used against her. Every fear became leverage. Every wound became strategy. And Sabrina smiled slightly beside him. Like winning mattered more than loyalty. Cornelia looked between them carefully, then quietly asked, "How long?" Neither answered. That was answer enough. Cornelia nodded slowly. "You know something funny," she whispered. Logan frowned. "For years, I thought Sabrina hated me because she was jealous." Sabrina's expression sharpened instantly. "But now I realize," Cornelia continued softly, "she hated me because I trusted her." Sabrina looked away first, and that tiny reaction told Cornelia everything. Logan moved toward her again. "Let's handle this privately." Cornelia laughed bitterly. "No," she said quietly. "I think private is where monsters survive." Then she lifted her phone slightly higher, because Logan Mercer had just forgotten something important. Broken women listen carefully. And tonight, Cornelia had recorded everything. Cornelia didn't cry after leaving the hotel penthouse. That frightened her more than the betrayal itself. For years, Logan weaponized her emotions against her. Tears became proof she was unstable. Anger became proof she was irrational. Pain became proof she was weak. So now, sitting alone inside her car beneath the glowing Manhattan skyline, Cornelia felt something unfamiliar settling inside her chest. Calm. Cold, dangerous calm. The recording sat safely on her phone, every word, every lie, every expression of contempt they accidentally revealed while believing she was too broken to fight back. Her phone buzzed again. Logan. This time she answered immediately. "What do you want?" His voice remained controlled, but she could hear tension beneath it now. "You embarrassed yourself tonight?" Cornelia almost smiled. "Interesting. Not we hurt each other. Not let's fix this. Embarrassed yourself." Reputation always came first with Logan. "You brought your mistress to a romantic penthouse suite," Cornelia replied quietly. "I think you're confused about which one of us should feel embarrassed." Silence. Then came the manipulation. "This situation is more complicated than you understand." There's that word again. "Cornelia." "No," she interrupted softly. "You don't get to manage me anymore." The line went quiet. For the first time since she met him, Logan sounded uncertain around her. That realization gave her strength she didn't know she still possessed. Finally, he exhaled sharply. We need to discuss financial protections. Cornelia frowned slightly. Financial protections? The blood test situation could create legal complications for the Fowler family. Your father is already under pressure. Your father. Not Richard. Not the man who may have helped steal her. Still trying to force emotional loyalty through language. Cornelia leaned back slowly against the seat. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'll send documents tomorrow. Something cold moved through her stomach. Documents for what? Restructuring of family assets? Temporary precautionary measures. Cornelia closed her eyes briefly. Even now. Even after the affair. Even after the lies. He was thinking about money. And suddenly, Evelyn's warning echoed louder than ever. People connected to Logan Mercer helped bury this story. Cornelia opened her eyes again slowly. What happens if I refuse? Logan's silence lasted too long. Then finally, you don't want unnecessary conflict. There it was. Not concern. Threat. Small. Polished. Elegant. But still a threat. Cornelia ended the call without another word. The following morning, a thick envelope arrived at the hotel front desk. Mercer and Vale Legal Group. Cornelia stared at the envelope for nearly a minute before opening it. Inside sat over 30 pages of financial documents. Trust transfers. Asset restructuring. Temporary authorization agreements. Most people would have skimmed them. Cornelia read every line carefully, and the deeper she read, the colder she became, because hidden beneath legal jargon and corporate phrasing was one horrifying truth. If she signed these documents, Logan would gain indirect control over nearly everything connected to the Fowler estate. Properties, trust accounts, investment holdings, even portions of charitable foundations. Cornelia's hands trembled slightly. This had been planned. Maybe not recently. Maybe for years. The realization made her physically ill. Her phone rang again. This time from an unknown number. Cornelia answered cautiously. Hello? A woman's voice responded immediately. Cornelia Fowler. Yes. My name is Naomi Bennett. Cornelia sat upright instantly. I'm an attorney specializing in financial protection and marital asset litigation. Cornelia frowned. How did you get my number? A slight pause. Margaret Holloway contacted me. Cornelia blinked in surprise. Margaret, already trying to protect her. The thought unexpectedly warmed something deep inside her chest. I normally wouldn't interfere, Naomi continued, but after reviewing some preliminary information tied to Mercer and Vale, I strongly advise you not to sign anything. Cornelia stared down at the papers spread across the hotel bed. So, I'm not imagining this. No, Naomi said bluntly. You are being maneuvered. The honesty nearly made Cornelia emotional. No gaslighting, no euphemisms, just truth. When can we meet? Cornelia asked quietly. 2 hours later, Cornelia walked into Naomi Bennett's office overlooking Bryant Park. Unlike Logan's cold corporate spaces, Naomi's office felt warm and alive. Dark wood shelves lined the walls. Jazz music played softly in the background. Fresh flowers sat near the windows, a space designed by someone emotionally safe. Naomi herself stood as Cornelia entered. Early 40s, sharp navy suit, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She shook Cornelia's hand firmly, then immediately said, You look exhausted. The compassion in her voice almost broke Cornelia instantly. Instead, Naomi handed her tea first. No judgment, no pressure, just humanity. Cornelia nearly forgot what that felt like. After reviewing the documents for 20 minutes, Naomi leaned back slowly in her chair. Well, she said flatly, your husband thinks you're stupid. Cornelia gave a weak laugh despite herself. That obvious Naomi slid several pages forward. These clauses would gradually transfer voting control of multiple trust assets into shell corporations connected to Mercer Holdings. Cornelia's stomach turned. So, if I signed, you'd slowly lose financial independence without realizing it until it was irreversible. The room fell silent. Cornelia looked out the window at Manhattan moving endlessly below them. I loved him, she whispered quietly. Naomi's expression softened slightly. That's usually when people become easiest to exploit. Tears burned Cornelia's eyes again. Not because Naomi was cruel, because she was right. Cornelia spent years making herself smaller to preserve peace around people who benefited from her silence. No more. Naomi folded her hands carefully. "Tell me something honestly," she said. "Do you think Logan married you for love?" The question hurt more than Cornelia expected, because deep down, she already knew the answer. "I think," Cornelia whispered painfully, "he married someone easy to control." Naomi nodded slowly, like she had seen this story before. "Then we stopped making you easy." Something inside Cornelia shifted again at those words. Not revenge, not hatred, awareness. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't asking her to endure pain gracefully. Someone was teaching her how to protect herself from it. Naomi suddenly smiled faintly. "I have an idea." Cornelia looked up. "What kind of idea?" Naomi tapped the stack of papers lightly. "You signed the documents?" Cornelia stared at her in shock. "What? But not these documents." Slow understanding spread slowly across Cornelia's face. Naomi's smile sharpened. Men like Logan survive because they assume emotionally wounded women don't become strategic. For the first time in days, Cornelia felt something dangerously close to satisfaction. Naomi opened a separate folder calmly. "These versions protect your assets completely while creating the illusion of compliance." Cornelia blinked. "You can do that?" Naomi leaned back slightly. "Oh, sweetheart," she said dryly. "Corporate men didn't invent manipulation. They just convinced the world they did." A small laugh escaped Cornelia unexpectedly. Real laughter. Tiny, fragile, but real. And for the first time since the gala, she felt something unfamiliar returning beneath all the grief. Power. That evening, Logan arrived at the penthouse believing Cornelia had finally become obedient again. She sat calmly at the marble dining table wearing soft gray cashmere, the signed documents resting neatly beside her. Logan visibly relaxed the second he saw them. There she is. The compliant wife, the manageable woman. He approached slowly. "I knew you'd come to your senses." Cornelia looked up at him quietly, and for the first time in years, she let him underestimate her. Logan became nicer after Cornelia signed the documents. That terrified her more than his cruelty ever had. Cruel Logan was predictable, cold, dismissive, sharp-edged, but kind. Logan kind. Logan meant he believed he was winning. For the next several days, he transformed back into the man Cornelia fell in love with years ago. Flowers arrived at the penthouse every morning. He complimented her appearance again. He asked whether she had eaten. Once he even brushed her hair behind her ear gently while saying, "We'll get through this together." The performance would have worked once, not anymore. Now Cornelia saw the machinery underneath it. Manipulation dressed as tenderness. Every smile calculated. Every touch strategic. And somehow that realization hurt even more than the affair. Because she finally understood something devastating, Logan had studied her vulnerabilities more carefully than he ever studied her heart. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Cornelia sat inside Naomi Bennett's office reviewing additional financial records. Stacks of paperwork covered the conference table. Shell companies, offshore transfers, trust restructuring plans. The deeper Naomi dug, the uglier the picture became. "This wasn't spontaneous," Naomi said calmly while flipping through another file. "Your husband has been positioning himself financially for years." Cornelia stared blankly at the documents. "Years," she repeated quietly. Naomi nodded. He anticipated eventual control over Fowler assets long before the blood test situation surfaced. Cornelia leaned back slowly in her chair. It was strange. Every new betrayal should have shattered her further. Instead, clarity was making her stronger, like truth was finally rebuilding the parts lies nearly destroyed. Naomi studied her carefully. "You're handling this differently than most clients." Cornelia looked up. "How so?" "Most people still try protecting the fantasy." Cornelia gave a weak smile. "I think my fantasy died at the gala." Naomi's expression softened slightly. "No," she corrected gently. "I think your denial did." The sentence stayed with Cornelia all afternoon, because deep down she knew Naomi was right. There had always been signs. Logan humiliating her in subtle ways during dinners, encouraging dependence while calling it partnership, convincing her sensitivity was weakness instead of intuition. Even the affair with Sabrina suddenly made emotional sense now. Sabrina didn't steal Logan because she loved him. She stole him because hurting Cornelia made her feel powerful, and Logan chose Sabrina because she mirrored his worldview. Ambition over empathy, control over love, winning over loyalty. That evening, Cornelia attended her first therapy session. The idea would have embarrassed her months ago. Vivian always treated therapy like something weak women needed because they lacked discipline. But Cornelia was beginning to understand something important. Emotionally healthy people didn't fear self-awareness. Dr. Rachel Monroe's office overlooked the Hudson River. Warm lamps glowed softly beside overflowing bookshelves. The room smelled faintly like vanilla and cedar. Safe. That word hit Cornelia unexpectedly. Safe. "How are you feeling today?" Dr. Monroe asked gently. Cornelia almost laughed. How do you answer that question after discovering your husband betrayed you? Your family lied to you, and your entire identity may have been stolen. Instead, she whispered, untethered. Dr. Monroe nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. No minimizing, no correcting. No, you're overreacting. Cornelia felt tears sting her eyes immediately. I don't know how to trust myself anymore, she admitted shakily. Everyone around me acted like my emotions were the problem. Dr. Monroe leaned forward slightly. Cornelia, emotionally manipulative environments train people to distrust their instincts. The word settled deep inside her chest. Manipulative environments. Not difficult personality. Not weakness. Environment. Cornelia looked down at her hands quietly. I always felt different growing up. Different how? Like... She swallowed hard. Like everyone else understood something about belonging that I didn't. Dr. Monroe studied her carefully. What if your body recognized the truth long before your mind did? Cornelia froze. God. What if that was true? What if her loneliness had never been irrational? What if some part of her always sensed she was surviving inside someone else's life? That realization emotionally wrecked her. She cried harder than she expected. Not elegant tears. Not controlled tears. Years of grief leaving her body all at once. Dr. Monroe let her cry without interruption. No judgment, no discomfort, no demand to calm down. And strangely, that simple kindness healed something inside Cornelia, more than she could explain. Later that night, Margaret called again. This time the conversation lasted almost 2 hours. Margaret told stories carefully like someone handling fragile glass. How she used to sing while rocking baby Cornelia to sleep. How she painted the nursery pale green because she wanted her daughter to grow up loving nature. How she never celebrated Cornelia's birthday without lighting a candle privately. Cornelia listened silently while tears slipped down her cheeks. Not because the stories were tragic, because they were loving, deeply loving. A kind of love she spent her whole life starving for without realizing it. I kept your baby blanket, Margaret admitted softly. Cornelia covered her mouth emotionally. You did? I kept everything. The ache in Cornelia's chest became almost unbearable. How did you survive all those years? She whispered. Margaret went quiet for a moment. I didn't, she answered honestly. Not really. Silence stretched painfully between them. Then Margaret asked softly, did they love you? Cornelia's breath caught. Such a simple question, yet impossibly complicated. She thought of Vivian's cold eyes, Richard's indifference, Sabrina's cruelty, Logan's manipulation. Then she remembered the little moments too. Richard teaching her chess once during a storm, Vivian fixing her hair before school photos, family vacations where laughter briefly felt real. The complexity hurt. I think, Cornelia whispered carefully, they loved me as long as I stayed convenient. Margaret started crying quietly on the other end of the line. Oh, sweetheart. Cornelia closed her eyes tightly. No one had ever sounded heartbroken for her before. Not once. The following week, Logan's behavior became increasingly tense. At first, he seemed satisfied, believing Cornelia remained emotionally dependent on him. But slowly, he noticed changes. Small ones. Dangerous ones. She stopped apologizing constantly, stopped explaining herself, stopped seeking reassurance. She answered questions calmly now. Sometimes she simply looked at him silently until he became uncomfortable first. The shift unsettled him deeply. One night during dinner, Logan finally snapped. You've been acting strange. Cornelia looked up from her wine glass. Strange how detached? Interesting? Detached. Not hysterical, not unstable. Detached. Meaning he could no longer emotionally control her predictably. Cornelia tilted her head slightly. Maybe I'm tired. Logan studied her carefully, then quietly asked, Have you spoken to anyone else about the blood test? There it was again. Fear. Cornelia almost smiled. No, she lied smoothly. Logan visibly relaxed, and for the first time in their marriage, Cornelia understood the power of withholding truth from someone who weaponized it against you. Later that night, Naomi called unexpectedly. I found something, she said immediately. Cornelia sat upright in bed. What? Naomi hesitated briefly. Cornelia? You may not just be Margaret Holloway's daughter. A cold chill moved through her body. What do you mean? Naomi's voice lowered carefully. Holloway Biotech Foundation has no surviving heirs. Cornelia frowned in confusion and silence. Then Naomi said the sentence that changed everything again. You may legally own part of a multi-billion-dollar medical empire. Cornelia spent the entire night staring at the Manhattan skyline after Naomi's revelation. A multi-billion-dollar medical empire. The words felt surreal, not because of the money, because of what it implied. Someone had not only stolen her identity, they had stolen her future. Suddenly, Logan's obsession with financial restructuring made horrifying sense. The blood test didn't create panic because Cornelia was emotionally unstable. It created panic because powerful people stood to lose control. By morning, Cornelia sat aboard a train to Boston, with trembling hands wrapped around a paper coffee cup. Margaret Holloway had invited her to visit. Cornelia almost canceled 3 separate times during the trip. Fear kept rising in waves. What if the connection felt forced in person? What if Margaret expected too much emotionally? What if Cornelia disappointed her? Years of emotional conditioning still lingered beneath the surface. Logan spent years making her feel fundamentally inadequate. Healing didn't erase damage overnight. As the train rolled into Boston under pale gray skies, Cornelia felt physically nauseous. Margaret lived in a quiet historic neighborhood lined with brick townhouses and old maple trees. Nothing flashy, nothing performative, the exact opposite of the Fowler estate. Cornelia stood frozen outside the brownstone door for almost a full minute before finally knocking softly. Footsteps approached quickly, then the door opened, and everything inside Cornelia shattered. Margaret Holloway looked older than the woman in the photograph, of course. Softer, a little fragile around the eyes, but unmistakably familiar. Same eyes, same mouth, same expression when emotional. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Margaret covered her trembling lips with one hand. "Oh my God," she whispered. Cornelia felt tears instantly burn her eyes, because for the first time in her life, someone looked at her like they recognized themselves in her. Not suspicion, not disappointment, recognition. Margaret started crying first, then Cornelia did too, and suddenly they were holding each other in the doorway while 32 years of grief collapsed between them. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered repeatedly through tears. "I'm so sorry." Cornelia held her tighter instinctively. "You didn't do anything wrong." Margaret broke down harder at those words. Inside the brownstone, warmth surrounded Cornelia immediately. Bookshelves lined the walls. Soft jazz played quietly from another room. Family photographs covered nearly every surface. And suddenly, Cornelia noticed something that made her chest ache. There were pictures of her everywhere. Not actual photos. Age-progressed sketches, digital renderings, different versions of what Margaret imagined her daughter might look like through the years. At 5, at 10, at 16, at 30. Cornelia stopped walking. Oh my God. Margaret looked embarrassed suddenly. "I know it's probably strange." "No," Cornelia whispered emotionally, "it's heartbreaking." Margaret looked down at her hands. "I didn't know how else to keep you alive." The sentence nearly destroyed Cornelia, because while Vivian spent years emotionally distancing herself, Margaret spent those same years emotionally searching for her. That difference mattered more than biology ever could. They sat together in the kitchen drinking tea while rain tapped softly against the windows. At first, conversation felt awkward, not cold, just fragile. Two strangers connected by devastating intimacy. Margaret studied Cornelia constantly, like she was afraid she might disappear. "You smile exactly like my mother," she said quietly at one point. Cornelia laughed softly through tears. "No one's ever told me that before." Margaret's expression darkened slightly. "They should have." Hours passed slowly as Margaret shared pieces of the past. After Cornelia's birth, Margaret suffered complications and briefly lost consciousness. When she woke up, doctors informed her the baby had died unexpectedly, but Margaret never believed them. "They wouldn't let me hold you," she whispered painfully. "Not once." Cornelia's stomach twisted. "I kept telling everyone something felt wrong, but nobody listened." Margaret smiled sadly. I was a grieving woman. People confuse grief with madness very easily. Cornelia thought instantly of Logan, of Vivian, of every time emotions were used to discredit her. Women in pain terrified people because pain often spoke truths. Polite society preferred buried. Margaret eventually stood and disappeared upstairs briefly. When she returned, she carried a small white box carefully. I kept these. Inside sat tiny baby items preserved with heartbreaking care. A hospital cap, a bracelet, a faded pink blanket, and a delicate silver necklace with a tiny moon charm. Cornelia stared at it breathlessly. I bought this while I was pregnant, Margaret whispered. I was going to give it to you when you turned 16. Cornelia touched the necklace carefully with trembling fingers, then suddenly remembered something. At 13 years old, she once begged Vivian for a moon necklace she saw in a jewelry store window. Vivian called it childish. Cornelia almost laughed through tears now. Maybe some parts of us always reach instinctively toward where we belong. Margaret looked at her carefully. Did they hurt you? The question lingered heavily. Cornelia wanted to say no automatically. Conditioning again. Protect them. Minimize pain. Stay agreeable. But she was tired of lying for people who never protected her truth. They made me feel unwanted, she admitted quietly. Margaret's eyes filled instantly with tears. Oh, sweetheart. Cornelia swallowed hard. They gave me everything except emotional safety. Silence settled heavily across the kitchen. Then Margaret whispered something that changed Cornelia forever. That wasn't love. Cornelia froze. Because deep down, she spent her whole life trying to convince herself emotional survival counted as love. But maybe love wasn't supposed to leave you constantly apologizing for existing. Later that evening, Margaret finally revealed the part of the story she feared most. There's something else you need to know. Cornelia looked up carefully. Margaret hesitated. Your adoptive father wasn't just involved after the switch. A cold sensation moved through Cornelia immediately. What do you mean? Margaret's expression darkened painfully. Richard Fowler was one of the attorneys hired to suppress the investigation. The room went silent. Cornelia stared at her in disbelief. No. Margaret nodded slowly. I found his name buried in sealed hospital litigation records years later. Cornelia felt physically sick. Richard knew, all these years. He knew. Suddenly every distant look from him felt different now. Not indifference. Guilt. Oh my God. Margaret looked devastated for her. There's more. Cornelia's chest tightened. Margaret stood slowly and walked toward a locked desk drawer. From inside, she removed an old newspaper clipping. A photograph stared back at Cornelia instantly. A distinguished older man shaking hands at a charity gala. Silver hair, sharp eyes, cold smile. Cornelia recognized him immediately, Charles Mercer. Logan's mentor, the man who practically built Mercer Holdings. Margaret's voice shook softly. He was one of the hospital board advisors during the scandal. Cornelia's blood ran cold. No wonder Logan panicked. No wonder the records were buried. No wonder Mercer and Vale controlled access. This wasn't just family betrayal anymore. It was generational corruption. And suddenly Cornelia understood something terrifying. Logan didn't simply inherit ambition from Charles Mercer. He inherited methods. Then Margaret whispered the sentence Cornelia would never forget. I don't think your husband married you by accident. Cornelia couldn't stop thinking about Margaret's final sentence during the train ride back to Manhattan. I don't think your husband married you by accident. At first, the idea felt too monstrous to believe, but the deeper she examined her marriage, the more horrifyingly possible it became. Logan entered her life at the exact moment she became emotionally vulnerable after Richard Fowler's first major health scare. Logan integrated himself into the Fowler family unusually fast. Charles Mercer personally mentored him shortly afterward, and now Mercer and Vale had been connected to her sealed records for decades. No, this was bigger than betrayal. This was strategy disguised as romance. By the time Cornelia arrived back at the penthouse, something inside her had transformed completely. Fear no longer controlled her. Knowledge did. The penthouse was dark except for the city lights glowing through the massive windows. Logan sat alone in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey when she entered. He looked up immediately. Relief flickered across his face before irritation replaced it. Where were you? Cornelia removed her coat calmly. Boston. His expression sharpened instantly. That reaction told her everything. Not confusion, recognition. You went to see her, he said quietly. Cornelia froze. Her heartbeat slowed dangerously. You already knew about Margaret. Logan stood slowly from the couch. Cornelia? No, she interrupted softly. Don't lie to me again. Silence stretched heavily between them. Finally, Logan set down his drink. You don't understand the full situation. God. Always those same words. Complicated, strategic, sensitive, as though human lives were legal inconveniences. Cornelia looked at him carefully. How long have you known who I really am? Logan's jaw tightened. Long enough to understand the risks. Risks. Not tragedy, not cruelty. Risks. Cornelia almost laughed at how emotionally empty powerful people became when protecting themselves. You married me because of this, she whispered. That's not true. But he answered too quickly. And suddenly Cornelia realized something chilling. Logan didn't fear her emotions anymore. He feared her intelligence, because now she could see the pattern. You knew I was connected to Holloway Biotech. Logan stayed silent. You knew there was a chance I was the legal heir. Still silence, and silence from guilty people always screamed loudest. Cornelia nodded slowly. Oh my God. Logan finally stepped toward her. You need to calm down and think rationally. Cornelia actually smiled this time. Not warmly, coldly. There's that word again. He stopped moving. For years, Logan weaponized emotional instability against her because instability kept her dependent. But now she was calm. And calm women terrified manipulative men. You built an entire marriage around access, Cornelia whispered. Did you ever love me at all? Something complicated flickered briefly across Logan's face. Not remorse. Something darker, possession. I cared about you. The sentence hit harder than hatred would have. Cared. Like she had been an investment, a responsibility, an object, not a wife, not a partner. Cornelia felt another illusion die quietly inside her chest, but strangely the death no longer destroyed her. It freed her. The following morning, Naomi Bennett arrived at the penthouse carrying 3 thick legal folders and the energy of someone preparing for war. We're running out of time, she said immediately. Cornelia poured coffee while Logan remained locked inside his office taking tense calls all morning. Naomi lowered her voice. He's accelerating financial movement. Cornelia frowned. What does that mean? It means he suspects you know more than you should. Fear flickered briefly through Cornelia's stomach. Can he take everything? Naomi looked almost offended. Not if I breathe correctly. Despite herself, Cornelia laughed softly. Naomi spread documents across the dining table. Holloway Biotech's founder recently passed without direct heirs, she explained. If your biological identity is legally confirmed, ownership rights become very complicated. Complicated? Again, that word. But now Cornelia noticed something important. The difference between Naomi and people like Logan was simple. Naomi used complexity to protect people. Logan used complexity to control them. We need evidence connecting Mercer Holdings to the original cover-up, Naomi continued. Once we establish motive, the entire structure starts collapsing. Cornelia thought carefully, then suddenly remembered something. The board meeting. Naomi looked up. What board meeting? Logan's merger presentation next week. A slow smile appeared across Naomi's face. Public, Cornelia nodded. Major investors. Media coverage. Executive leadership. Naomi leaned back slowly. Well, she said calmly, that's dramatically convenient. For the first time in weeks, Cornelia felt something dangerous spark inside her. Not revenge exactly. Justice. That evening, Logan hosted a private dinner at the penthouse with several investors tied to Mercer Holdings. Normally, Cornelia would have hidden upstairs after recent scandals. Instead, she attended. And Logan clearly hated how composed she looked. Cornelia wore a sleek black dress and Margaret's moon necklace hidden beneath it. Simple makeup, hair softly pinned back. Elegant, controlled, unreachable. Investors greeted her politely while studying the tension beneath the room's surface. Rumors were already spreading. Cornelia could feel it. During dinner, one executive smiled carefully. Cornelia, we were all concerned after the gala incident. Incident. Another sanitized word for emotional devastation. Cornelia smiled gracefully. How kind. Logan watched her constantly throughout the evening, trying to read her, trying to regain psychological control, but she no longer reacted predictably. That terrified him. Halfway through dessert, another investor casually mentioned Holloway Biotech's upcoming restructuring after the founder's death. The room shifted almost imperceptibly. Logan's fingers tightened around his wine glass. Interesting. Very interesting. Cornelia tilted her head softly. I heard the inheritance situation is unresolved. The investor nodded. Billions tied up until legal clarification. Cornelia glanced toward Logan calmly. His expression remained neutral. Too neutral. The performance almost impressed her. Almost. Then she delivered the sentence intentionally. I suppose hidden family connections can become very expensive. Silence. Absolute silence. Logan looked directly at her now. Warning flashed behind his eyes. For years, that look would have intimidated her instantly. Now, it only confirmed weakness, because men secure in power didn't need silent threats. After the guests finally left, Logan cornered her near the windows overlooking Central Park. What exactly are you doing? Cornelia sipped her wine calmly. Living honestly. Don't play games with me. She looked at him quietly. That's ironic. Anger darkened his face immediately. You have no idea what forces you're provoking. Cornelia moved closer slowly. And you have no idea who you married anymore. For the first time since she met him, Logan looked uncertain. Not angry, uncertain. Because the obedient woman he manipulated for years was disappearing right in front of him, and something else was replacing her. Someone sharper, someone calmer, someone impossible to emotionally control. Later that night, Cornelia sat alone in the guest bedroom, reviewing evidence Naomi helped organize. Audio recordings, financial records, hospital connections, affair evidence, every piece slowly fitting together. Then, Naomi texted her one final message before midnight. We're ready when you are. Cornelia stared at the city lights outside the window for a long time, then slowly touched the moon necklace resting against her chest. 32 years ago, powerful people stole her identity because they believed truth could stay buried forever. They underestimated one thing. The quietest women often become the most dangerous once they stop begging to be loved. And next week, Logan Mercer planned to stand before an entire boardroom, believing he still controlled the narrative. He had no idea Cornelia intended to destroy it. The boardroom on the 43rd floor of Mercer Holdings overlooked Manhattan like a throne room built for powerful men. Glass walls, black marble floors, a 12-foot digital presentation screen glowing softly at the front. Every chair, already occupied by investors, executives, attorneys, and media representatives, invited to witness Logan Mercer's biggest corporate merger announcement of the year. Money filled the room like perfume. So did ego. Cornelia stood outside the double doors for several seconds before entering. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished glass. Black tailored suit, hair swept elegantly away from her face. Minimal jewelry except for Margaret's moon necklace resting against her collarbone. For the first time in years, Cornelia didn't dress to look acceptable. She dressed like a woman who belonged in the room. Naomi stood beside her reviewing documents calmly. You ready? Cornelia exhaled slowly. No. Naomi smirked faintly. Good. Terrified people pay attention. Inside the boardroom, Logan spoke confidently to investors gathered around the massive conference table. Controlled, charismatic, perfect. The version of him the world admired. Cornelia used to admire him too. Now she only saw performance. As soon as she entered, subtle whispers spread across the room. People noticed the tension immediately. Logan's eyes locked onto hers. For one brief second, genuine alarm flickered behind his composed expression. He hadn't expected her to show up. Good. Cornelia took a seat quietly near the center of the table while Naomi settled beside her. Across the room, Sabrina sat near the executive team, wearing a cream-colored designer suit and false confidence. The moment Sabrina noticed the moon necklace around Cornelia's throat, her expression tightened slightly. Interesting. Logan recovered quickly. Of course he did. Men like him survived through adaptation. Shall we begin? He asked smoothly. The presentation started normally enough. Market projections, expansion forecasts, investor growth, corporate optimism carefully packaged into expensive slides. Cornelia watched silently while Logan moved through the room with polished authority. Anyone watching from outside would think he was brilliant. Maybe he was. That was the dangerous part about manipulative people. Cruelty and competence often existed together. Halfway through the presentation, Logan shifted tone slightly. As many of you know, he said carefully, recent personal rumors involving my family have created unfortunate distractions. The room grew still. Here it comes. Cornelia folded her hands calmly in her lap. Logan sighed with practiced disappointment. My wife has been under emotional strain following deeply confusing medical revelations. Naomi immediately stiffened beside Cornelia. Logan continued carefully. She's struggling emotionally, and I ask everyone here to respect her privacy while we navigate this difficult time. There it was. Publicly subtle, privately devastating, not calling her unstable directly, just planting seeds. Emotional strain, confusing, privacy. The language manipulative men used when preparing to discredit women elegantly. Several investors nodded sympathetically. Exactly as Logan intended. Then he made the mistake that destroyed him. I hope everyone understands, he added softly, that grief can sometimes distort perception. Cornelia slowly looked up. Distort perception? Meaning, don't trust her? Something inside her became perfectly still. Naomi whispered quietly beside her, "Your move." Cornelia stood. The room immediately quieted. Logan's expression sharpened. "Cornelia," he warned softly. "Not concern. Warning." She ignored him, then walked calmly toward the front of the boardroom. Every eye followed her. For years, Cornelia feared rooms like this. Now she understood something liberating. People only controlled your voice when you kept surrendering it voluntarily. She faced the room calmly. "I've spent most of my life apologizing for my emotions," she began softly. Silence spread instantly. Cornelia glanced briefly at Logan. "But recently, I realized something important." Her voice steadied further. "The people most threatened by honest emotions are usually the ones benefiting from deception." Logan's jaw tightened. "Cornelia," he interrupted sharply, "this isn't appropriate." She smiled faintly. "That's interesting," she whispered, "because inappropriate behavior never seemed to bother you before." Sabrina visibly paled. The room shifted uncomfortably. Investors exchanged quick glances. Naomi slid a folder forward across the table. Cornelia opened it carefully. "Since my husband mentioned distorted perception," she continued calmly, "I thought factual evidence might help everyone." Logan stood abruptly. "This meeting is over." "No," Cornelia said quietly. "It's finally honest." Then she pressed a button on the presentation console. Audio filled the boardroom instantly. Logan's voice, clear, cold. "She still has no idea who she really is." Silence crashed across the room. Another recording followed. "You were always fragile." Then another. "Once she signs everything over, we're done with her." Sabrina's face drained completely of color. Logan lunged toward the console. Naomi stepped directly between them. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer." For the first time, real panic appeared in Logan's eyes. Not polished irritation, panic. Because control was slipping publicly, and narcissistic men feared public humiliation more than moral failure. Cornelia continued calmly while the room spiraled around her. "My husband publicly implied emotional instability while secretly attempting to manipulate trust structures tied to hidden inheritance claims." Several investors immediately began flipping through distributed documents Naomi prepared earlier. Pages detailing shell corporations, asset movement, hidden affiliations, Mercer and Vale legal restrictions. The atmosphere turned electric. One executive stood suddenly. "What the hell is this?" Logan's composure cracked visibly now. "These documents are being misrepresented." Cornelia looked directly at him. "No," she whispered. "For once they're being understood." Then she delivered the final blow. "My husband also conducted a years-long affair with my adoptive sister while privately preparing to absorb financial control connected to my biological family's estate." The room exploded. Sabrina stood instantly. "That's not true." Cornelia calmly pressed another button. Hotel surveillance photos appeared on screen. Sabrina and Logan entering the Mercer Grand Penthouse together. Dates, times, repeated visits. Another audio clip played. Sabrina's voice this time. She always needed someone to save her. Gasps spread across the room. One investor muttered, "Jesus Christ." Logan looked genuinely murderous now. "Turn that off." Cornelia faced him fully for the first time. For years she feared this man, loved this man, broke herself trying to keep this man emotionally comfortable. Not anymore. "You taught me silence," she said quietly. The room fell completely still. Then Cornelia looked directly into his eyes and finished, "You just forgot. Silence listens." Even Naomi looked impressed. Sabrina suddenly snapped. This is all Logan's fault. The betrayal in Logan's expression was immediate. Good. Let them turn on each other. That's what selfish people always did when survival mattered. One board member slammed a folder shut violently. Did you use company resources to suppress hospital records? Logan opened his mouth carefully. Then the boardroom doors opened. Everyone turned. 3 federal investigators entered alongside corporate fraud attorneys. Badges visible, expressions cold. The lead investigator spoke calmly. Logan Mercer. For the first time in his life, Logan Mercer looked powerless. Real fear flooded his face as the investigator continued. We need to ask you several questions regarding financial fraud obstruction and sealed medical litigation connected to St. Vincent Hospital. The room dissolved into chaos. Executives shouting, investors panicking, phones ringing, Sabrina crying. But through all of it, Cornelia stood perfectly still, not triumphant, not cruel, just awake. Because revenge didn't heal her. Truth did. And as Logan stared at her with disbelief and fury collapsing across his face, Cornelia finally understood something beautiful. Different was never the thing that made her weak. It was the one thing that kept her from becoming them. By the next morning, every major business outlet in America carried the same story. Mercer Holdings under federal investigation. Corporate heir exposes family fraud. $1 billion. Merger collapses after boardroom scandal. Cornelia watched the headlines appear one after another while sitting quietly inside Margaret's Boston kitchen. Rain fell softly outside. The television murmured endlessly in the background. And for the first time in weeks, Cornelia felt strangely calm. Not happy, not healed, but calm. Across from her, Margaret placed fresh tea gently onto the table. You don't have to watch this all day, she said softly. Cornelia looked toward the television again. Logan's photograph filled the screen. Perfect suit, controlled expression. The same face she once trusted more than her own instincts. He looks so different now, Cornelia whispered. Margaret sat beside her quietly. How Cornelia stared at the screen thoughtfully. Small, that surprised her most. For years, Logan felt emotionally enormous, like his approval controlled the temperature of her entire life. Now she finally saw him clearly, just a man. Not a god, not a savior. Just a deeply broken man obsessed with power because power felt safer than vulnerability. Meanwhile, Mercer Holdings was collapsing in real time. Investors fled overnight. Multiple board members resigned. Charles Mercer publicly denied involvement with the hospital scandal, which only intensified media attention further. And Sabrina became social poison almost instantly. Videos from charity galas resurfaced online. Photos, rumors. People who once worshipped her suddenly treated her like contamination. Cornelia should have felt satisfied. Instead, she mostly felt tired. Because destruction looked glamorous in revenge fantasies. In reality, it looked lonely. 3 days after the boardroom explosion, Naomi called with another update. Richard Fowler has officially been subpoenaed. Cornelia closed her eyes slowly. Even though she expected it, hearing the words still hurt. What about Vivian? She's cooperating. That surprised Cornelia instantly. Voluntarily? Yes. Naomi hesitated briefly. And honestly, I think she's emotionally unraveling. Cornelia looked down at her tea silently. Part of her wanted to hate Vivian forever. Another part remembered something Dr. Monroe once said during therapy. Hurt people often become experts at passing pain forward. It didn't excuse cruelty, but it explained it. That afternoon, Cornelia returned to Connecticut for the first time since the boardroom scandal. The Fowler estate looked exactly the same. Perfect hedges, perfect windows, perfect lies. Yet something about the house felt smaller now, like fear had once exaggerated its power over her. Vivian opened the door personally, and Cornelia almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the immaculate socialite perfection. No makeup, no designer elegance, no emotional armor. Vivian looked exhausted. Human. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Vivian stepped aside quietly. Come in. The house felt eerily silent without staff moving around, or Sabrina's music echoing upstairs. Richard was gone, meeting with attorneys, or investigators, or both. Cornelia sat carefully in the formal living room where she spent years trying to behave correctly enough to earn love. Vivian remained standing for a long moment before finally speaking. I suppose you hate me. Cornelia looked up slowly. The strange thing was, she didn't. Not anymore. Hatred required emotional attachment, and something inside her had finally detached from this house. I don't understand you, Cornelia admitted quietly. Vivian gave a broken laugh. That makes two of us. Silence settled heavily between them. Then, unexpectedly, Vivian sat down across from her and began crying. Not elegantly, not quietly. Real crying. Cornelia stared in shock, because Vivian Fowler never cried. Not when Richard emotionally disappeared. Not when Sabrina spiraled. Not even during funerals. But now. Now she looked shattered. I tried so hard not to love you, Vivian whispered through tears. Cornelia froze. What? Vivian covered her face briefly. You looked nothing like us, she admitted shakily. Every time I saw you, I remembered what we'd done. The room went still. Cornelia's chest tightened painfully. You knew from the beginning. Vivian nodded slowly. Richard arranged everything. The words hit like ice water. Not suspicion anymore. Truth. I was desperate for a child, Vivian whispered, and Richard said this was our chance. Cornelia felt physically ill. You stole me. Vivian broke down harder. We told ourselves we were saving you. No, Cornelia said quietly. You were saving yourselves? Vivian couldn't deny it, because deep down they both knew it was true. Tears streamed endlessly down Vivian's face now. You were such a sweet little girl, she whispered. You kept trying to earn affection we didn't know how to give. Cornelia's eyes burned suddenly, because hearing Vivian acknowledge it out loud somehow hurt more than the neglect itself. You made me feel unwanted my entire life. Vivian nodded weakly. I know. No excuses. No manipulation. Just guilt. And somehow that made everything sadder. Cornelia stood slowly. I used to think there was something wrong with me. Vivian looked devastated. There wasn't. But you spent years treating me like a burden. Vivian closed her eyes tightly, because loving you made me confront what kind of woman I'd become. The honesty stunned Cornelia silent. For the first time in her life, Vivian sounded emotionally naked. Not cold, not superior, just broken. Then Vivian whispered something barely audible. I think part of me always knew you would eventually leave us. Cornelia swallowed hard, because deep down, she always knew too. As Cornelia walked toward the front door, Vivian suddenly spoke again. Logan came here yesterday. Cornelia stopped immediately. Fear flickered through her stomach. What did he want? Vivian looked disturbed. He wanted damage control. Of course he did. Even after everything, Logan still viewed emotional destruction like a public relations problem. What did you tell him? Vivian looked directly at Cornelia. For the first time in my life? Her voice cracked painfully. I chose you. Tears filled Cornelia's eyes unexpectedly. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but grief. Grief for what they could have been if fear and selfishness hadn't poisoned everything. Outside, rain had started falling lightly. Cornelia walked slowly toward her car, feeling emotionally hollow. Then she saw him. Logan stood beside a black SUV at the edge of the driveway, hands in his coat pockets, rain soaking his dark hair, waiting. Her heartbeat slowed dangerously. He looked different now, too, not polished, not untouchable, just tired. When Cornelia approached, Logan studied her face carefully like he was searching for traces of the woman who once loved him unconditionally. I've been calling, he said quietly. I know. Silence lingered between them while rain fell softly around them. Finally, Logan stepped closer, and for the first time since the scandal began, his voice sounded genuinely human. They're destroying everything. Cornelia stared at him calmly. No, she whispered. The truth is, pain flickered visibly across his face. Then Logan said the words she never thought she would hear. I made mistakes. Cornelia almost laughed. Mistakes. Such a small word for emotional devastation. You built an entire relationship around manipulation. Logan looked away briefly. I didn't know how to stop. That sentence chilled her, because deep down, she believed him. Powerful people rarely woke up one day deciding to become monsters. Usually they became monsters gradually while convincing themselves survival justified cruelty. Logan looked back at her again, and for the first time he looked afraid of losing her. Real fear, real grief. Too late. I loved you, he whispered. Cornelia felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly, because part of her would probably always mourn the version of him she thought existed. But mourning illusion wasn't the same as wanting it back. You only valued me once I stopped needing you, she said softly. Logan said nothing, because he knew she was right. Logan started showing up everywhere after that night in Connecticut. Not aggressively, not violently, almost worse. Flowers arrived at Cornelia's Boston apartment twice a week. Handwritten notes appeared with them. I miss you. We can still fix this. Please talk to me. Months earlier, those words would have destroyed her emotionally. Now they only made her sad, because Logan still didn't understand the real problem. He thought losing her was the tragedy. But the real tragedy was how long Cornelia abandoned herself trying to keep him comfortable. One evening she returned from therapy to find Logan sitting on the front steps of Margaret's brownstone beneath falling snow. Margaret looked furious when she opened the door. I told him to leave. Cornelia studied him quietly. He looked exhausted. Dark circles beneath his eyes. Unshaven jaw. Wrinkled coat. The mighty Logan Mercer was unraveling publicly. Mercer holding stock continued collapsing. Multiple lawsuits surfaced weekly. Charles Mercer stepped down from several boards. And Sabrina disappeared almost entirely from public life after leaked affair recordings spread online. Everything Logan built was burning, and now he sat outside Cornelia's door looking like a man realizing power could not negotiate love back once trust died. Margaret touched Cornelia's arm carefully. You don't owe him anything. Cornelia nodded softly. I know. Still she stepped outside. Snow drifted quietly through the Boston streetlights while Logan stood slowly to face her. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Logan whispered, You look happier. The sentence caught her off guard. Not because of what he said, because he sounded wounded saying it. Cornelia wrapped her coat tighter around herself. I'm healing. Logan lowered his eyes briefly. That hurts more than I expected. She almost responded cruelly. Almost. But healing had changed something fundamental inside her. Cornelia no longer wanted to win emotionally. She just wanted peace. What do you want, Logan? His voice cracked slightly for the first time since she met him. You. The old Cornelia would have melted hearing that. The new one heard something different. Possession, dependency, fear of abandonment, not healthy love. Logan stepped closer carefully. I know I failed you. Cornelia stared at him quietly. You didn't fail me, she said softly. You used me. The honesty visibly wounded him. Good. Some truths deserve to wound. I loved you the only way I knew how, Logan whispered. Cornelia closed her eyes briefly. That sentence might have broken her once too, because part of her understood it. Logan came from emotionally cold people, powerful people who viewed vulnerability as weakness. Maybe manipulation really was the only language of intimacy he learned growing up. But understanding damage wasn't the same as excusing it. You know what the saddest part is? Cornelia asked quietly. Logan looked at her carefully. I would have loved you through almost anything if you had just been honest with me. Snow settled softly on Logan's shoulders, and now Cornelia felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly. Because grief remained even after awakening. She mourned the marriage she wanted, the safety she imagined, the future she spent years trying to protect, but illusions eventually become prisons when you refuse to leave them. Now, she whispered, I finally love myself more. The words shattered something inside Logan visibly. Realization? Too late realization. He looked away briefly, jaw tightening emotionally, then quietly asked, Is there someone else? Cornelia almost smiled sadly. Interesting. Even now, Logan understood healing only through replacement, as though women could not possibly leave simply because they deserved better. No, she answered softly. There's just finally me. Silence lingered heavily between them. Then Logan reached into his coat pocket slowly. Cornelia instinctively stiffened, but he only removed a small velvet box. Her stomach dropped. No, 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 no. Logan opened it carefully. Inside sat her original wedding ring, the one she stopped wearing after the boardroom scandal. I kept hoping you'd put it back on. Cornelia stared at the ring quietly. Years ago, that ring symbolized safety. Now it looked like evidence. She closed the box gently. I can't. Logan's eyes filled with something dangerously close to panic. Cornelia, no, she interrupted softly. Please don't make me explain why loving me shouldn't have hurt this much. The sentence hit him hard. Good, Because emotional abusers often only understand pain once they finally feel it personally. Logan swallowed hard. Oh, what happens now? Cornelia looked toward the glowing windows of Margaret's brownstone behind her. Warmth, honesty, safety. Then back at the man she once built her entire identity around. I moved forward. His expression broke slightly. And me, Cornelia hesitated. Not because she wanted him back, because once upon a time she truly loved him. Deeply. Completely. And part of healing meant accepting that love can be real even when the relationship becomes toxic. You figure out who you are without controlling people, she whispered. Logan laughed bitterly under his breath. You think I can change? Cornelia studied him quietly. I think pain changes everyone eventually. Then she walked back toward the house, but Logan's voice stopped her one final time. I did love you. Cornelia paused beneath the falling snow, and for the first time, she believed him. Not entirely, not healthily, but in the damaged, possessive, emotionally limited way Logan Mercer understood love. The realization made her sad instead of angry. Without turning around, she whispered, I know. Then she went inside and closed the door. 2 months later, Cornelia stood backstage at the New York Women's Leadership Gala, while hundreds of powerful women filled the ballroom beyond the curtains. The irony almost made her laugh. 1 year ago, she attended events like this beside Logan, feeling invisible. Now she had been invited as keynote speaker, not because she was someone's wife, because she survived. Naomi adjusted Cornelia's microphone with a proud smile. You nervous, terrified? Good, Naomi smirked. Means you still care. Margaret stood nearby, wiping emotional tears already. The sight warmed Cornelia's chest. Family, real family. Not perfection, not blood alone. Safety, truth, love without conditions. As Cornelia stepped toward the stage entrance, she caught sight of herself in the mirrored wall nearby. And for the first time in her entire life, she recognized the woman staring back. Not the insecure daughter, not the obedient wife, not the emotionally starving girl begging to be chosen. Just Cornelia, whole. The announcer spoke her name. Applause thundered through the ballroom. Cornelia stepped onto the stage beneath golden lights while hundreds of women rose to their feet. For one overwhelming moment, emotion clogged her throat completely. Then she spotted Margaret smiling through tears in the front row. And suddenly the fear disappeared. Cornelia approached the microphone slowly. The ballroom fell silent. She looked out across the crowd thoughtfully before finally speaking. I spent most of my life believing being loved meant becoming smaller to make other people comfortable. Stillness filled the room instantly. Cornelia smiled softly. But healing begins the moment you realize your kindness was never the weakness. Tears filled several eyes across the audience already. And somewhere far behind the crowd, unseen by everyone except Naomi Logan Mercer, stood silently near the ballroom entrance, listening to every word. Finally understanding what he destroyed. And exactly what he lost. 1 year later, Cornelia Holloway stood barefoot in the middle of a sunlit apartment overlooking the Boston Harbor, holding fabric samples in one hand and coffee in the other. The apartment smelled like fresh paint, sea air, and possibility. Her possibility. For the first time in her life, every object around her existed because she chose it. Soft cream curtains moved gently in the morning breeze. Warm oak floors reflected golden light. Books lay open across the dining table beside unfinished design sketches. Nothing in the space felt cold or performative anymore. No marble meant to impress strangers. No furniture nobody was allowed to touch. No rooms designed around silence. Just comfort, just peace, just her. Cornelia smiled faintly as she pinned another design sample onto the wall. After the scandal, she finally returned to interior design full-time. Not luxury branding, not elite corporate aesthetics. Healing spaces, women's shelters, trauma recovery centers, family counseling clinics. Places where emotional safety mattered more than appearances. It turned out pain made her understand spaces differently. People opened up around warmth. Survival softened under gentleness. And Cornelia knew exactly what emotional starvation looked like in a room. Her phone buzzed softly on the counter. Margaret. Cornelia answered immediately. Hey, you forgot lunch again, didn't you? Cornelia laughed quietly. Maybe. Cornelia. That tone. Soft but firm. Protective. The kind of maternal concern that still emotionally stunned her sometimes. I'm eating now, Cornelia promised. Margaret sighed dramatically. I spent 32 years missing you. The least you can do is consume basic nutrients. Cornelia smiled through sudden tears. Even now, moments like this overwhelmed her unexpectedly. Not because they were dramatic, because they were normal, and normal love felt miraculous to someone who spent her whole life surviving conditional affection. After ending the call, Cornelia stood quietly by the window overlooking the harbor. A year ago, she thought losing the Fowler family and Logan would destroy her completely. Instead, losing them forced her to finally meet herself. The divorce finalized 6 months earlier. Logan didn't contest it much by the end. Maybe because federal investigations consumed most of his life now. Maybe because somewhere along the way he realized Cornelia was truly gone emotionally. Not angry, not waiting. Gone. Mercer Holdings survived in fragments after massive restructuring, though Logan's reputation never fully recovered. Charles Mercer quietly disappeared from public life. Sabrina moved to California after social circles in New York turned brutally cold toward her, and Vivian still wrote letters occasionally. Not manipulative ones, honest ones. Apologies filled with guilt and grief. Cornelia answered sometimes, sometimes not. Healing, she learned, did not require pretending pain never happened. It simply meant pain no longer controlled every room inside you. Later that afternoon, Cornelia arrived at the Holloway Foundation building downtown. The original biotech empire had partially transferred into her name after months of legal battles and identity verification. The money still felt surreal sometimes, but Cornelia refused to let wealth become another form of emotional corruption. So she transformed part of the foundation into something else entirely, the Holloway Identity Recovery Initiative, an organization helping victims of medical fraud, illegal adoption concealment, and identity theft reconnect with biological histories safely, because once you understood what stolen identity felt like, you never ignored that pain in others again. Inside the foundation lobby, a young woman nervously approached Cornelia near the reception desk. Ms. Holloway, Cornelia turned gently. The woman looked barely 22, fragile, anxious. "I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered emotionally. "Your story gave me the courage to search for mine." Cornelia's chest tightened softly. A year ago, she would have felt uncomfortable receiving admiration. Now she understood something important. Survival stories mattered because they reminded broken people healing was possible. Cornelia smiled warmly. "You deserve the truth about your life," she said softly. The young woman started crying instantly, and for once Cornelia didn't rush to stop someone else's emotions from existing comfortably. That night, after a charity event, Cornelia walked alone through downtown Boston, beneath glowing streetlights and autumn wind. The city felt peaceful around her now. No performance. No pretending. Just life. Her phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. Cornelia hesitated before answering. "Hello, silence?" Then Logan's voice quietly filled the line. "I almost didn't call." Cornelia stopped walking slowly. A strange sadness moved through her chest. Not longing, just history. "How are you?" he asked softly. The question startled her because it sounded genuine now. No strategy, no manipulation, just tired honesty. Cornelia looked up at the night sky. "I'm okay." A long silence followed. Then Logan laughed quietly under his breath. "You know what's strange, what you sound peaceful." Cornelia smiled faintly. "I am." More silence. Then Logan admitted something she never expected to hear. "I spent my whole life thinking power meant never needing anyone." Cornelia listened quietly. And losing you taught me loneliness doesn't look like being alone," he whispered. "It looks like becoming someone incapable of real love." The honesty hurt, because part of her still mourned the man he could have been. "I hope you heal too, Logan." He exhaled shakily. "I don't deserve that kindness." Cornelia closed her eyes briefly. Maybe not, but bitterness would only poison her healing now. "You know," she whispered softly, "for years I thought being different made me hard to love." Logan's voice cracked slightly. "No." Tears stung her eyes unexpectedly. "No," he repeated quietly. "Different was the best thing about you." For a moment neither spoke. Then Cornelia smiled sadly into the cold Boston night. The old version of herself would have mistaken this conversation for hope, but healing changes your vision. Now she understood closure and reconciliation were not the same thing. "I have to go," she whispered gently. "I know." A pause, then one final sentence from Logan Mercer. "I'm sorry I only saw your value after breaking you." Cornelia looked out across the glowing harbor lights, and for the first time the apology no longer felt like justice she desperately needed, because her worth no longer depended on the people who failed to recognize it. "It's okay," she whispered softly, and surprisingly, it finally was. After the call ended, Cornelia continued walking slowly through the city while wind moved gently through her hair. Different. That word haunted her entire life. Different daughter, different wife, different woman. But now she finally understood the truth. Different was never her curse. It was proof she survived becoming like them. And somewhere above the Boston skyline, for the first time in her entire life, Cornelia Holloway finally felt at home inside herself. Sometimes the deepest pain in life doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people we spent years trying to earn love from. Cornelia's story reminds us how dangerous it can be to confuse survival with love, silence with peace, and sacrifice with worthiness. For most of her life, she believed being different meant something was wrong with her. But in the end, being different was the very thing that protected her soul from becoming cold, manipulative, and emotionally empty like the people who hurt her. One of the hardest lessons we ever learn is that love should never require us to shrink ourselves. Real love does not humiliate you, control you, gaslight you, or make you feel grateful for basic kindness. Real love feels safe. It allows you to breathe without fear. And sometimes healing begins the moment you stop begging people to choose you, and finally choose yourself instead. Cornelia also teaches us that closure is not always revenge. Sometimes closure is waking up one day and realizing you no longer need an apology to believe you deserved better. The people who betray us often recognize our value only after losing access to us. But by then, the strongest thing we can do is walk forward without hatred poisoning our future. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that your sensitivity is not weakness, your kindness is not stupidity, and your scars do not make you unlovable. The right people will never make you earn the right to feel safe around them. And if you've ever felt unwanted, betrayed, manipulated, or emotionally exhausted from loving the wrong people, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story may help someone else feel less alone tonight. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories about healing self-worth, betrayal, and finding the courage to rebuild your life after heartbreak.